Will there be a Christian revival in America? You know, there's that saying, that famous saying, hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. And there's some truth to that. And we have the entirety of history, and we have the millennia of the existence of Christianity to reference and see whether or not there is a possibility for America to have a Christian revival. And if we study history, I think it's definitely viable. It's definitely something that not only might happen, I really think it will happen. You know, the Roman Empire, when it first started, Christianity was illegal. But only a few short centuries after, Christianity was the official religion of the empire. And then, of course, you had medieval Europe, where there were times when Christianity was really budding and prominent and played an active role in people's daily lives. And then there were times when it weren't. And it's this ebb and flow, this come and go. And one of my favorite books is titled Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. Now, G.K. Chesterton was a Catholic, but when he wrote the book Orthodoxy, what he meant by Orthodoxy is not the Eastern Orthodox Church or the Oriental Orthodox Church. What he just meant was good old traditional, old school Christianity. That's what Chesterton meant when he says that. And in his book, he had an idea that I thought was really good. And he said that orthodoxy is the perpetual rebellion, because there's always a new fad that comes and goes. Nihilism is a fad. Existentialism is a fad. Postmodernism is a fad. Crystals and witches and paganism is a fad. And in every generation, we reaffirm no. Orthodoxy is the truth. Next generation comes, new fad. No. Orthodoxy is the truth. And all these fads, they come and go. All these ideologies, they come and go, and they're fads, and they're interesting, or they're pertinent today, but then they're gone tomorrow. But Christianity, being the constant, static revolution, always stays with us. Now, will it ever become the mainstay or the prominent religion in the West or America? Not just Eastern Orthodoxy, not just Oriental Orthodoxy, just Christianity as a whole. Let's just take Christianity as a whole. Because lately in the West has become a lot more secularized, where religion is no longer the top priority. People might wear a cross necklace. This is how you know we've become secular, because people might wear their cross necklace, but they're wearing it as a religious piece. Maybe that individual isn't even Christian, but you know, it's cool, it's trendy. We wear crosses. That's what we do. If that is not an indicator of a society becoming secularized, then I don't know what is. And that's where we're at, and that's where we've been at. And I think a lot of this has occurred because people are really comfortable, because we've had a lot of affluence and material wealth in America, in the West. And I think it's just human nature. And it's not a good thing, but it's human nature for when you feel comfortable, you start to sleep a little bit. You start to get a little bit lazy. You know, a hard man works hard, and then sometimes when he achieves what he wanted to achieve, he starts to rest on his laurels. He starts to take it a little bit easy. Maybe he doesn't train as much. Maybe he doesn't work as hard anymore. That's human nature. That's fallen human nature. And I think that's what's happened. And that's why we've become secularized. And you're noticing it happen too in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is starting to become secularized. Egypt's becoming secularized. This is what I think naturally happens when people start getting a little bit too full. Their bellies get a little bit too full, and they're a little bit too distracted. You know, there's that old phrase from antiquity, from classical Greek antiquity, and it says, to distract the masses, all you need is bread and circuses. And that's true. If they're fed, if they're entertained, what are they gonna rebel for? Why are they gonna go out and strive? This is unfortunate, but that's what happens. And I think now, as we've had such a long period and a long phase of prosperity in the West, we're starting to weaken as a country. Hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times create weak men. And that's kind of the phase I think we're in. You know, we're starting to really separate ourselves from the realities of life, the realities that a man can't become a woman, or a woman can't become a man, or that we need to you know, not spent superfluously and not rack up a lot of debt, etc., etc. We're forgetting things that are common sense, and we can only get away with forgetting common sense when we can afford to make those mistakes because we're so affluent, we're so comfortable. But as this comfort decreases, and as we enter into harder and harder times, which has already happened, which is why a lot of young men in the West are a lot more traditional and a lot more conservative than was the case in previous generations. Gen Z men are a lot more conservative than millennials, than Gen X, when they were in that same age cohort. And this is because they live in a more grueling environment. It's more grueling economically. It's more because of whatever socio-sexual landscape is occurring. It's harder for them to find a good woman that they would want to marry, etc. In these hard times where they have to work twice as hard or 3 times as hard for a fraction of the rewards that their older generations, their fathers or their uncles or whatever, grandfathers had to do. This makes it so men have to learn to toughen up and weather the storms and stick true to reality. And the reality is Christianity. That is the ultimate reality. And it's unfortunate. Ideally, men and women and everyone would stay fast and stay close to God through the good times and the bad times. But in reality, that's not what happens. And for this reason, that's why I believe that in the West, there actually will be a Christian revival. And I think we might actually even be in this paradoxical situation where the Middle East starts to become more secular because they're starting, Saudi Arabia, Dubai, the Arab Emirates, all of this stuff, they're starting to get money. And you could start to see there's a lot more liberalism in their culture. Saudi Arabia, they didn't allow women to drive. Now women can drive. They didn't have rock concerts. Now they have rock concerts. They're taking off the hijab, so on, so on. Affluence always creates this sort of comfort, this sort of sloth, laziness, slumber. But in the same way that hard times create strong men, it is these times that are going to create weak men, which are going to create hard times, and we just go back on the loop-de-loop circle, back on the Ferris wheel. You know, Solomon, he says in the Bible, he says, there is nothing new under the sun. And while history doesn't repeat, it definitely does rhyme.